going to speak on the community needs assessment. And I know that sounds very dry and clinical, but actually that has a lot to do with what you're talking about here, which is caring and connection to resources. The Council on Aging, and in particular the social worker, they help gatekeep the town's Fletcher Fund. And many people don't know what the Fletcher Fund is, but I frankly didn't know what it was either. And then there was a meeting that Richard had convened, and it was in February of 2017. It was to try to determine ways that the town could stimulate the utilization of the fund. And the fund has been around since the 1880s, and it was deliberately developed to, quote, serve Winchester's poor. And so then you fast forward to, a century plus, and of course many people don't think there are poor people in Winchester. And Richard convened this work group, and the idea was to see how we could better utilize the fund. And what became evident was that really there was no understanding as to what the needs were for residents in town. There were very small social service provision in town, most coming out of the Council on Aging with a clinical social worker and nurse. So the decision was to actually commission a needs assessment. And a lot of this was through Richard's support and through the stakeholders, a group of people that he brought together. So a needs assessment request for proposals was brought out to the public, and the town had awarded the contract to Human Resources in Action. So the needs assessment is now a little over a year in process. It's almost winding down. So what I'm going to do is just explain a little sort of preview, because until we go through the final process, I don't really think it's fair until the findings sort of get all pulled together. But the Human Resource in Action, they brought together, they did an analysis of demographic data, they worked with school district data and health data. They convened meetings with key informants and stakeholders. They met with 15 of the frontline human service providers to try to find out what were issues in town. They did an environmental scan to determine what are actually the resources that exist in town. And then lastly, they disseminated a survey online and paper copies, which hopefully some of you actually managed to take the survey. And there were over 1,035 surveys received, which isn't a bad number representing a community of 22,000. And we had the survey translated in Chinese, Spanish, and of course it was in English. So some of the themes that surfaced from the surveys as well as from the interviews is cost of living, the lack of affordable housing in town, and a lot of this is the imbalance of having poor people with so many homes and the price value of homes. Youth behavioral health issues became a very big issue, and they worked with the school system and a lot of the data from the schools, and stress and the lack of mental health services available in town was cited as being a very major need. There are also specific needs of older adults, and obviously health is a big issue, housing, ability to downsize to affordable housing, and not surprisingly, transportation, and also isolation. And if you don't solve transportation, you really can't help dealing with isolation. And then finally, transportation and traffic, which many people think it's so bucolic, but to a lot of people that live here, just having to wait for 7 cars in a row means that there's the traffic congestion, so that's a major perceived finding. So then what are we going to do with this? And we're almost at the point of finalizing it, and obviously it'll be published on the town's website. Already some people are starting to utilize this for grant funding, outside grant funding, so we can try to address some of the needs. I might add, I've already made some changes to my budget and made requests to capital, and hopefully we'll be able to solve some of the issues that we think are in particular of important needs to seniors. Use it for strategic planning efforts. The Jenks is involved in a major strategic planning, and we're using all this data to see where we need to go in the future. We will have a resource directory that I have an MSW intern from Simmons working with us this year, and we're gonna have a bound resource directory and also post it online, and that'll be an end product. And then finally, the Council on Aging is willing to offer the services of its social worker who will be able to address needs for everyone in town. We never really say no anyway, but that way there would be some dedicated day that the social worker would be available to work with mothers and children and people that aren't 60 and over, but be available to help link people to resources. So I'm very excited about the outcome. I certainly appreciate everybody who was either a part. I see many people out there. There were a lot of community organizations that contributed to the needs assessment. The town was a major supporter as well. And I think that this is going to be really important data to do good things with, and it certainly ties into the purpose that we're here tonight. Thank you.